Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Nina Paul, and we're going to talk a little bit about her family and her roots. So, welcome, Nina. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm going to enjoy this. I know it.
I hope so. I always enjoy it. Um, I always start with the typical question is, why and when did you start researching your family?
Well, it started as a small child, really, because I hated to take naps, and my mother would I can't fall asleep, Mom. I can't fall asleep. She says, lay down and name all of your cousins. And at the time, I had 78 first cousins.
Oh my goodness.
So eventually I fell asleep. I always got stuck on my Aunt Minnie's kids because they were so much older than me, and they lived in Buffalo and I lived in California. So, I'd get stuck. Wait a minute. I know she's got 15 kids and I've only got 11 names here. And so, that would get me thinking about it. But I actually started doing research in 77. But of course, we didn't have the internet then. I didn't have good information then. My mother couldn't remember where her mother's family was from. And with a name like Papa, that
Right.
covers all of Italy. Thank you very much. You know, everybody wants to be the Pope. So, I ran across finally a census that instead of putting Italy on there, my grandmother said her parents were from Basilicata. I said, okay, so now that makes us San Felice because
Yeah.
everybody in Buffalo is from San Fele just about. But at least it narrowed down the region for me. But all of my grandparents are from different places in Italy. And as you know from your research, record availability is sketchy in some areas, or they're incomplete. There's sometimes big gaps of years that are not available, and of course, those are the years I need. So San Fele has been my focus because I have two great grandparents from that area, and I've so far been able to trace them all the way back to the late 1600s, early 1700s. So that's been a whole lot of fun for me.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, you know, you're like a pioneer going back that far. But when I was a kid, I always liked looking at the photo album.
Oh, yeah,
And the black pages with the little things with the fit the pictures in
sure,
and all of that.
sure.
And so I guess I always I always had the bug. But I have to ask you, 78 cousins. I thought I had a lot of cousins with 23. So how many in your mom's family?
My mother was the 13th of 22 children.
22.
I
Oh my
know.
gosh.
Same parents.
Holy smokes.
They lost eight of them in infancy or early childhood. But yeah, they had a big family, and it's interesting to see that once people got to America, the infant mortality diminished. I look at the records in Italy, and you got a family that's had 12 kids, and there's only three that lived beyond their teenage years. So, that was an improvement for them health wise, and of course, economically. But and all of those things can contribute to whether or not your kids live to be 20. But yeah, it's been quite a journey emotionally and spiritually. But yeah, it was fun growing up with cousins because you take them everywhere you go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, they're like, brothers and sisters. They're
Yeah,
just like an extra set of
absolutely.
brothers and sisters. Um, but that's amazing. So, now was your mother and her siblings, were they born in Italy or half there, half here? How did that all work
No,
out?
she and all of her siblings were born in Buffalo.
The ones that died early, they died in Italy, and then
No, no, all of my grandmother, all of my mother's siblings were born and died in Buffalo.
oh, okay. So
Um,
then,
my
so your grandparents came young.
Yeah, well, my grandparents, my mother's mother was actually born in Buffalo. Her eldest brother was born in Italy and came over in 1886. Um, and that was the first of the family, my family that came over. The rest came over in the early 1900s.
Yeah, so
My
86, that's very early. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, my grandmother, my dad's mother came from Sicily right after the was it Mount Etna? I
Hmm.
don't remember. Okay, in Messina. So she came over right after that volcano explosion. And my mother's father came from Foggia, and he got here about maybe 1910. My dad's father came from Terlizzi, and I think he was here in maybe 1910 or 11. So my mother's family from San Fele were the earliest ones to come over.
Yeah. So now, do you know why they wound up in Buffalo?
A lot of the San Feliz came over and they ended up in Buffalo, and so they went where they had people.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's true for most. Yeah.
yeah, and from what I'm seeing, I've got probably 50,000 names in my in the database that I'm creating from the San Fele residents, and and I'm blown away at how many people are actually related to me either by blood or by marriage. But then it's up on the hill and nobody wanted to go down the hill to find a spouse.
Or they couldn't get down the hill. One
Yeah,
or the
yeah, they're
other.
like, yeah, take your cousin Rosie, it's okay. She'll be fine.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
That's funny. Yeah, but a lot of those towns are like that. So that's good information, certainly for anybody that's got family from San Fele to have somebody putting together that database.
Well, it's good for me, and it's been good for the people that are on the San Fele Facebook page, because I can pull up everybody that I've got in the database for them to find and connect their people to. I'm finding most people they're struggling because they're going backwards as we're taught to do. But what is missing in that information is a full name. Grandma's death record says her father's name was Micklin. But when you finally get all the way back to his birth record, you find out that his name was Vito Mikla.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
It was something else, or even worse, that he used his deceased brother's birth record for his own marriage, and that's why everybody called him Joe. So it's been quite a challenge, and
Yeah,
and I've
well,
had,
my cousins from my oldest uncle, they were all born in Italy because my uncle didn't come over until he was like in his 30s and came with his whole family. And they told me they come from Torito, small town in Bari, and they said, they would send anybody to the back then, in the 30s and 40s, they send anybody to the town hall. They send the 5-year-old.
yeah.
So who knows what,
Absolutely.
they to make, like you said, they make up any name.
And birth and death records. I've had to mark the records with lots of comments because the name on the birth record is different than the name on the death record. But the kid's 3 days old, and the kid that they had 3 days ago was named Sebastiano. So I don't care that the death record says his name is now Angelo. He's 3 days old. I'm pretty sure this is the right kid.
Well, we have the Dominics. My mother's uncle was Dominic, and he had 4 older brothers named Dominic, and they would die. And I'm going, I'm trying to figure this out. And I'm saying, well, wait a second, no, that can't be him. No, that can't be him, because I was finding death records as I went through, and I'm thinking to myself, I said, how many times are you going to name a baby the same name until you say, okay, maybe there's a jinx here,
Yeah, yeah.
But they
I
did
would
it.
say, yeah, but they did. I've got one relative that had 12 children. They had 7 daughters named Teresa,
Wow.
and all but one died.
Yeah.
I haven't found a death record yet for the last Teresa, but I also haven't found a marriage record for her yet. So yeah, so it was real easy. You've got an underage daughter and the parents are dead, and the godparents or the aunt and the uncle or the grandparents, whoever's raising the kids, say, we've got to marry this kid off.
Yeah.
And she's going to get married. She's really 13, but hey, I got seven of her sisters here. We could use their birth record. So, and avoid the family council that they had to have.
Yeah. So I have to go back to your mom's family for a second. So were there any twins in that group of 22?
They love to keep telling me that my uncle Richard was a twin, but there's no indication that he ever had a twin. He told I asked his daughter, and she said absolutely not. He was not a twin. So in my mother's family, in her nuclear family, they didn't have any twins, but there were a lot of twins in the family. We've got twins in every generation, but it doesn't look like my grandmother had twins. Her sister Rosie did.
Now, did you do a DNA test?
Oh yes, of course.
And
of course.
So did you find any more? I mean, that's a lot to find, but did you find anybody you didn't know about?
Oh, I've got plenty I don't know about. There's about 15,000 matches, and that doesn't surprise me at all. There are a whole lot of. There's one line that I would love to connect because my father's paternal grandmother was a foundling. So we don't know anything about her family, and there's about 5 people that on the DNA matches that don't connect to anybody else in my family.
Right.
So I'm assuming that they are connected by way of, my great grandmother who was a foundling, but they won't respond to me. And that's really sad because they're the key to me connecting.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
and they don't care, they don't care. And and that's their choice. It's
Sure.
got to be hard to have people just hitting you up on message and say, hey, I think we're related, but whatever.
Well, I came up with somebody. She hadn't done ancestry. I think we connected on GEDmatch or something like that, and she came up as a second cousin. So now I'm like perplexed, right? And I know all my second cousins. I know everybody, and so I said to her, I said, well, gee, did you, who are you? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, I'm adopted. I said, I lived in Queens. Her adopted parents were Italian, so she had an Italian name. So now I'm going crazy because I'm trying to figure out which one of my cousins had this kid. And, I'm going through a whole process of elimination. I eventually figured out it was on my father's side. But I don't know. So finally she did Ancestry. And she matched my cousin's 3 children, all of whom were on Ancestry, as, half sister. So now I know, they're going to find out. So I contacted my cousin Donna and I said, did you see? She said, I saw. So I said,
yeah.
I said, do you know anything? She told me, she said, the only thing I can remember, because I think this girl, I think she was about the same age as Donna's youngest sibling. She said, the only thing I can remember is that my mother crying in the bedroom for 2 weeks. So my cousin must have known somehow, and whoever this girl, they decided to give the baby up for adoption, and but all is well. They've connected, and they know each other, and it was basically, wasn't her fault. She didn't have anything to do with this, and my good friend, he found his half brother, older brother.
Wow.
No one had a clue, and he to this day doesn't know. He doesn't think that his father had been married yet to his mother. He thinks this happened before. But yeah, and they're a spitting image. They look so much alike. And the other funny part of the whole thing is, he called me one day and he says, "Hey, there's an MS in your tree. Who is that?" I said, "It's Marion, my wife." He said, "We're 5th cousins."
Shut up.
So we're fraternity brothers going back 50 years, and we find out that he's a 5th cousin of my wife. Through
That's
Sicily.
funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. Now I did find 2 cousins who are the children of my second cousin on my mother's side, the Papa line from San Fele. Her 2 daughters from her first marriage are related to me on that line, obviously, but they're also related through their father to me on my father's line from Sicily.
Mm.
So that's kind of crazy. Who knew?
Yeah, and I have something similar to that on my grandmother's side, my paternal grandmother. I had no idea that there was any family in Italy when I started this whole thing, and my grandmother's name is Piermalo. So unlike Papa, that's Piermalo. There's one family, and that's it. That's the only family. And connecting with one of my cousins over there, I had seen on the record, because my grandmother was from 2 noble families, and just above the marriage of her mother and father, there was Piermalo and Crocolo. There was a Francesco Piermalo married a Maria Crocolo, and that was the aunt and uncle of my great grandparents. So again, you start like, you got to think things out here. And I think, I keep thinking to myself, well, gee, maybe they went to the wedding of the aunt and uncle and met. Or something like that. So in the case of my cousins, my Pio Malo cousins, we're related. We're cousins from two families.
Yeah.
So and I don't think that's that unusual, but finding it is unusual.
Finding it, and for me, finding it through such a distance. One family's from Basilicata, the other's from Sicily,
Yeah.
and they happen to meet in Buffalo, and both of them are related to me. I was like, wow,
That is
that's a trip.
that is strange. So going through these records, because I'll tell you about my mom's family. Everybody was, everybody in Torito was either a farmer, a farmer's helper, or a seamstress. And when I got back to like 1720, I finally found a guy. I think he was a forest ranger or something, some weird thing. Like, so did you find any interesting occupations or things like that going back through these records?
Well, I found that one line are the Fagellas. They were all like notaries and clerks over at City Hall, and pretty old established family. I don't know whether they were, some of them, prefaced their name with Dawn. That can mean anything really. And but I found a couple of those lines.
But they had to have some status, because they wouldn't have been able to just say Don
Exactly.
if they didn't have some status.
Exactly. And the rest of them were, were farmers, were shoemakers, were seamstresses and midwives, and and then they came to America and they lost, of course, a lot of that status, and started out as just one of those Italians from the boat, and making their way as best they could. My mother's grandfather came over. He became a rag picker, or he was a ragman.
Yeah.
And he got, there's one story where he and his sister got into a big old fight because he caught her in the backyard digging through his rags. That was his bread and butter. You just don't come over and dig through the rags and take what you want, But, his sons, his oldest son, the one that was born in Italy, became a teamster. And his boys all became boxers. Tommy Paul was featherweight champ in 1932. It's my mother's first cousin, and the youngest son became. He started off as a clerk somewhere, and then got bumped up to a chauffeur for one of the big wigs in Buffalo, and he ended up becoming a big deal. And then his children they're all very wealthy, well established people. But I've wanted to write a book. I've been thinking about it, writing something on the family and calling it, the children of the rag picker or something. And it's interesting to see how far the family has come, because they had to leave so much behind, and just having some stability in one place where you can prosper and make sure your kids are educated and make sure that they succeed in life, and watching that. And it's been It's been interesting. It's been quite a journey. It's been a journey of a lot of tears too, because I'm following not just one family. I'm following an entire community to see how they interact, who comes to your aid when there's a death in the family, and who runs over to the courthouse or wherever and registers the birth or the death or stands up for the wedding. Who are these people? How do they fit in the community? And it's been touching to see families that stay together throughout 100, 150 years, even 200 years. Here's this guy named Marinero and his son, and then his son shows up, and then it's like, wow, and they're still connected. We lose that, of course, in America. We've certainly lost that since the end of World War II, where everybody started moving out of their little enclave and to different states. Because that's where the work was, and so I feel badly that my kids have not grown up with their cousins, but my cousins in Gardena all stay together. They're still living in Gardena, and so they've got 3-4 generations worth of cousins that still hang out together.
Yeah, and that's what I say all the time. That's kind of missing. My kids certainly didn't have the same experience that I had. Like I said, they were just all brothers and sisters. I mean, and my aunts and uncles were like, a whole nother set of parents.
Yeah, I know. And if this one didn't swat you, the other one's going to.
You always got caught.
I had a situation. All of my son's friends used to come over to the house, and if they misbehaved, they knew they were going to catch it from me. And so I ran into one of his friends' mothers in the grocery store, and I said, Karen, I saw Ben out, and apparently he didn't tell you that he's grounded for 2 weeks. And she looked at me and she said, "Can you do that?" I said, "I can. I don't know if you can, but I grounded him for 2 weeks." She said, "Why?" And I said, "That's between him and me at my house. He knows why. He's grounded."
That's too funny. I guess he had he got the 3rd degree when he got home.
I'm sure he did. And it's really fun because, here he is, he's 40 years old, and he still calls me mom, and he still hits me up on text message. And
that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I was just out in California this summer to see my son, and, he had to make sure that Benji came with us for dinner, and yeah, it was good. Good times.
Sitting around the big table and all of that, and
oh yeah,
trying to graduate from the kids' table to the grown-up table, and
and I never did, and I actually got mad at my cousin Dominic's wife, who's my age, and he's quite a bit older. She was like 18 when they married, and he was close to 40. And she had Christmas dinner at their house, and she had me sitting with the kids, and I was 21 at the time, and she's got my cousin Sammy Jean sitting there with the adults. They said, "What is this?" And she says, "Oh, but Sammy Jean is taller." Like, "I'm going to deck you, woman, and knock you out." It's, yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple of rites of passage in my mom's family. One was getting to go to Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Because that, I don't think I got to Christmas Eve until I had my own car.
Really?
Yeah, because there were 9 brothers and sisters, and some of my cousins were older in the family, and then my grandmother had a room this big, so only so many people could fit,
Yeah.
So that, then of course getting from the kids table to the grown-up table, and then finally not being the youngest who had to hump to the store for soda or cheese. Because I was always the youngest, always had to go to the store. So
Yeah, exactly. I experienced that on one of the trips to Buffalo. I think I was probably 8, 9 years old, and we're at my Aunt Frances's house, and we're all playing cards at the table. It's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. We're all playing cards, and she sends my cousin Bart, who's a year younger than I am, out for donuts. And I'm looking at my mother like, what? And she says, that's just the way we do things here.
yeah, but back then it was safe back then. You didn't.
Well, yeah. Again, you stay in the same neighborhood for a long time. Yeah. Everybody knows you. It wasn't that unusual, I guess, to send an 8-year-old out for donuts at 1 o'clock in the morning.
My uncle used to write a note. Give Bobby a quarter beer or six, right? And go to the to the corner grocer.
Yeah.
And they, it's no problem.
Yeah, please give my daughter 2 packs of Chesterfield Kings.
It's funny. My cousin John, he's what is he? I think 2 months older than me. So we were always together. We grew up. He eventually moved to where we lived, and we grew up together. And my aunt would leave a pack of cigarettes on the table with like 2 cigarettes in it.
Uh-huh.
And my cousin would say, my mother thinks we're stupid, that we're going to take the last 2 cigarettes out of the pack. And meanwhile, you could go to the store and buy a cigarette at a time. I don't know if you had that. We used to call them Lucy's. Yeah. And you could go for 2 for a nickel. I think, 2 for a nickel. Yeah. It's like, what is it, 20 cents a pack or something like that. So yeah, those days unfortunately are gone. But even you mentioned people leaving. That's even happening in Italy now. I've met so many people now that from Italy, and they all say the same thing. They can't live in these towns anymore. It's all old people left in these towns.
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of the towns are selling houses for $1.
Yeah.
And they really want a family to come in and open a little shop and help revitalize the town. And it would be lovely. I'm not looking for a second career, third career, fourth career. I think I've already had 3 or 4 careers already. I'm pretty much done.
No, me too. I mean, I keep asking some of my cousins over there, can't we get one of the old houses? Can't we buy one back and fix it up, But I started the process to get citizenship. I should have done it a long time ago, but mainly for the kids. I mean, for me, it's not going to matter. It would be nice to have, and maybe, if you want to spend some time there, you can do it as a citizen. But I want them to be able to have it. And now with the EU, it makes travel, a lot easier if you're going from Italy to France or places like that. So.
I'd like to investigate that. I haven't done it. Things are quite complicated because my father's father came over, as I said, in about 1910 or so, 1911. He did file an intention, but he died when my father was 10 months old, before he actually got his citizenship. And when my grandmother remarried, my dad's stepfather became a citizen. And on that application, his wife, my grandmother, and the 2 children that they had together were included on it. Mm-hmm. But my father and his older brother were not. So even though so I think I can use that line.
Yeah. I mean, and they're very specific because, adopted parents wouldn't matter. It would be the grandfather, as long as, in my case, my grandfather naturalized, but he naturalized in 1936, and my father was born in 1923. So when my father was born, my grandfather was still an Italian citizen, therefore making my father an Italian citizen. So I'm okay. So in your case, it would be the same thing.
I think so, because my dad's stepfather didn't adopt him.
Right. Even if he did, it wouldn't matter, because it's totally by blood. Has to be by blood.
Well, yeah. It gets kind of crazy because there's more of a backstory, but we would need another 2 hours to go through it. And then I found out that the oldest of the papas, my great grandfather, they had no trust whatsoever of government, anything. He shows up on all of the censuses under a different name. It made my life hell looking through the census. I had to go by the address. That was the only way I could finally figure out who on this census report was my great grandfather, because on one he was Michael. His name was Bartolomeo.
Mm-hmm.
On another he was Charles. Another one says his name is Albert. He actually carried around citizenship papers that he did under his deceased brother's name.
Maybe he was into something nefarious.
I don't know. He was a rag picker.
Wow.
How nefarious could that be?
Yeah, but my cousin's husband used to deliver bread, and he used to drive around in a Cadillac. So,
you just reminded me of a story. I was living in Vegas in the early 90s, and my father came out to see us, and I brought him to one of the local casinos, and a little place with 2 blackjack tables and a whole bunch of slot machines and a good restaurant. And he's sitting at the table with this man, and he hears the Boston accent. My father, oh, you're from Boston. I'm from Boston. Where are you born? I'm born in Dorchester. I'm born in Dorchester. No kidding. And they introduced themselves. They're both named Frank. They're both from Dorchester. They were born the same day, the same year. They lived 2 blocks apart.
Wow.
And he married the daughter of the family that bought my father's bread route when he came to California, when he left to California. So he was just blown away by that. It was that, how many coincidences can you have?
Yeah, I mean, some of these things I don't think are really coincidences. I think there's some other force there pushing people towards something. I've come across way too many coincidences.
Well, yeah, I visited Phoenix back in my broadcasting days 100 years ago. And I was visiting a TV station that we represented out there. And we went out for drinks, and this man asked me to dance, and his name is Conti. No kidding. I said, my father's family are Contis. He says, yeah, but my family's from Messina. And I said, so's my father's family, and it really shook him up. It got him very nervous. For a minute, he said, I may be dancing with my cousin.
That's funny. Yeah. It's what is it? The second degrees of the 6 degrees of separation from. Yeah.
I'm 2 degrees from anybody you want to know. I'm hand to God. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah, and like I said, I've come up with, I've heard so many, similar stories like that. This one woman she was looking for. Her family came from a small little town in northern Italy. She was looking for a B&B. She said there were like hundreds, and she narrowed it down to 2. And went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and she picked one. She called, and the girl on the phone says, "Why are you coming here? This is nobody comes here." And she said, "Oh, my family's from here." "Oh, who's your family?" She gives her the name, and she says, "Hold on, let me get my mother." It turned out that this woman's, I don't know if it was a great-grandmother or great-aunt or somebody like that, left this property where this B&B was to the woman's family that she selected. How's that happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's something woo-woo out there.
No, definitely. I truly believe that. I mean, I've come across too many crazy stories like that. So, but anyway, this has been great fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate you taking the time. And so, anybody who's looking for your San Fele data, where they find it?
Where they find it, they email me at chaplainnina@gmail.com. CHAPLAINNINA@gmail.com.
Okay, great. And I'll put that in the blog, and I'll put that on the screen so everybody can see it.
Marvelous.
Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
The pleasure's all mine. You be well. God bless you. Have a great new year.
All right, thanks. You too.